Hello, am I audible? Can you hear me? Hello, 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 hello ji. Can you hear me? Okay, thank you. Thanks. So I guess I shall start in a few minutes. Let a few more people come. Hello, hi Ghanshyam. Ah, thank you, thank you. So I'm waiting for Lokesh Ohri ji to let me know if I can start. Once I get a go ahead, I shall start the talk. Okay, so hi, my name is Abhimanyu Pandey. I am an Indian national from Himachal Pradesh, and I'm right now in Germany doing my PhD at the South Asia Institute of the University of Heidelberg. I am doing it in the stream of anthropology, and I'm basically looking at the development and effects of connectivity, particularly by road in Himalayan borderlands. And my field site is the Trans-Himalayan Spiti Valley in Himachal Pradesh, which shares a border with Western Tibet, just like Uttarakhand does. So today I am going to share with you all some reflections on the Lipulekh Road. I was very generously invited by Dr. Lokesh Ori, who is an alumnus of the same institute where I'm currently doing my PhD right now. So thank you, Dr. Ori. And so basically, I have been associated somewhat with that region where the Lipulekh Road has been built and the larger transboundary region where the whole present controversy regarding the Lipulekh project has taken place. From 2014 till 2017, I worked for the International Center for Integrated Mountain Development, or ICMOD in other words, in Kathmandu. It is an intergovernmental body which at that time was responsible for stewarding an governmental project between China, India, and Nepal, and called the Kailash Sacred Landscape Conservation and Development Initiative. I worked as a sociologist in that project, And during that period in 2014, 2015 and 2016, I had the chance to visit the Mahakali Valley near in the areas in Dharchula and above in Pithoragarh district. And the farthest I've been along the trade to Kailash Mansarovar in that area is still Garbyang. And so yes, like before I proceed, I think there has been a request from the admins that we can have the questions towards the end. Maybe you can write your questions in the side and I shall look at them once I'm done talking. Yeah? I shall try to keep it brief because there is so much that can be said about this topic, and I have so many fond memories of also having been in that region and done research there and some work regarding that. So I was giving a background to my association with the Kailash Mansarovar region, and during my work in EC mode in Kathmandu, I was involved in basically mapping the combined uh, cultural and natural heritage of the transboundary Kailash sacred landscape, which spread over the districts of Pithoragarh in northeastern Uttarakhand, then in four districts of far western Nepal, including Bajang, Baitadi, Darchula, and Humla, and also then the Purang County of the Tibetan Autonomous Region of China. During my 3.5 years in EC mode, I had several occasions to do field missions in these regions, and I have uh, traversed a lot of it on foot. So, in 2016, July, August, I did a yatra to Kailash Mansarovar through the Nepali route, through the Humla route, based upon which through my organization, I got the chance to write a book, which you would have seen the poster circulated for this talk. So that was a research expedition involving scientists and scholars from four countries, India, China, US, and Nepal, who started our journey from Humla in far western Nepal and walked for 14 days before we reached the border with Tibet, and then continued our journey in Tibet to Kailash, to Mansarovar, and to Tirthpuri in western Tibet, and then walked all the way back. And the purpose of that journey was to understand how historically and in the present day these regions were linked to each other through ties of trade, uh, herding, Bhed Bakri Charana, and through pilgrimage, Kailash Mansarovar pilgrimage, and other forms of religious and social ties between these. So that was some bit of personal background, and then let's get to the core topic of this uh, talk, the Lipulekh Road. So I'll just try to lay out some of the uh, background facts regarding the Lipulekh Road. This road is about 75 kilometers long, and it was built by the Border Roads Organization. Uh, the project has been on since 2008 and it was meant to be completed in 2013. But due to difficulty of constructing in certain stretches and also due to low budget, it could not be completed in time. And particularly during the last 2 years, the Border Roads Organization of the Ministry of Defense in India really put a hard effort in completing and succeeded in completing the road from Gatiwagad, about 12.5 kilometers away below Darchula, from Gatiwagad to Nabidang, which is about 5-6 kilometers below the Lipulekh Pass, which stands at around 5,150 meters or so above the sea level. And the road was inaugurated on the 8th of May 2020 by Mr. Rajnath Singh, the Defense Minister, And it was said by him that the road is important for strategic, religious, and trade purposes. Yeah, and as we all know that there has been some controversy regarding the this region, particularly the region close to the Lipulekh Pass between Kalapani and Lipulekh, as to which country does it fall in? Does it fall in India? Does it fall in Nepal? And what is the role of China to play into all of this? I won't get into a lot of that because that has a whole very, very complex dynamic about it. But if one takes the understanding that currently exists with the government of India, it is that the Lipulekh Pass belongs to India, and the border lies in the stream that starts flowing just below the Lipulekh Pass. So all the land to the east of that river is in Nepal, whereas according to the Nepali version, the Lipulekh Pass belongs to Nepal, and the international border, it lies in the stream called, which originates from Limpiadhura in the present-day Pithoragarh district of India. This is based upon the agreement, a particular treaty that was signed between British India and the government of Nepal in 1815-16, which concluded the Anglo-Gorkha Wars, called the Treaty of Sigoli. Um, and the very initial maps that came out during that period actually showed, they strengthened the Nepali claim that the river indeed originates in Limpiadhura, but over a period of time, as the British recognized the strategic importance of the Lipulekh Pass, and also due to their heavier presence on the ground and the relative isolation and remoteness of this area, they began to show in 1860 that Lipulekh Pass was part of British territory. And following that, from 1860 till all the way down to the Panchayat Raj period in Nepal, the maps that came out of Nepal also tacitly showed either a silence or agreement that the Lipulekh Pass is, I mean, seldom was it questioned in the Nepali doctrine that this was a part or not a part of Nepal. And although there were always voices within the government of Nepal that questioned it, but Nepal was always trying to balance its relations with India and with China, and so this issue was never very overtly raised for many years till the time Nepal became a democracy in the late 1990s, early 2000s, and I think if one looks at it from the point of view of the Treaty of Sigoli, then Nepal does have a claim over the Limpiadhura stream. But if one looks at how history shaped out, how the force majeure um, claims of India have played out, then China has often supported through memorandums of understanding and through trade agreements and pilgrimage agreements in 1954, then in 2005, then in 2000, yeah, 2005, the that the border between India and China happens to be the Lipulekh. So I think it's otherwise, I don't particularly have any position of mine. These are all just historical material that I was looking at over this thing. And to give a brief background, that it still remains somewhat a contested issue from particularly from the Nepali government's side, and yeah, it has been in the news because of that of late. But I want to look more at the effects and the potential that the road itself carries, the Lipulekh Road. So I shall now talk more about that. Um, so how were things before the road? Um, The community residing within the Mahakali Valley is the Shoka Samaj. They are the Rang people, and for centuries, historically, they have had very dense ties with people living on the other side of the border, both towards Nepal and towards Tibet. They have had जिसको हिंदी में बोलेंगे बेटी रोटी का रिश्ता with Nepalis, and also they have had ties of trans-border pastoralism. सो इस साइड के जो रंग शौका लोग थे वो बहुत पुराने टाइम से तिब्बत के साथ व्यापार करने के लिए अलग अलग उत्तराखंड के पासेस से चाइना जाया करते थे, और वैसे ही नेपाल के जो रंग और शौका समाज हैं उनके साथ भी उनका एक बहुत ही डेंस रिश्ता रहा है बहुत लंबे टाइम से. And traditionally, these people were practicing transhumance, which means that in the winter months they would live with their animals in lower habitations. In the summer months, they would migrate over a long distance with all their animals to villages in the upper parts of the Mahakali Valley, where some of them would continue to practice agriculture, and some of them called the kunchas, they would take long lines of animals like goat and sheep and yak and load them with various kinds of merchandise that they would have procured during the winter in places in the Bhabar and Tarai of Uttarakhand and Nepal, respectively, and like oil, like grains, like sugar, like clothes, etc. And they would take it across the passes in the Himalaya, and then they would cross over into the trade marts of Tibet, and they would exchange these merchandise bought from the lower Indian plains for materials that were available more in Tibet, like borax, like salt, like wool, like gold. And this was a very short period of trade every year, just a few months, 5 or 6 months, typically from May till September, October. And during the British time, the British government tried to regulate it more, and it is also during the British time that there was one particular DC, district collector of Almora district, called Charles Shearing, who in 1904-1905 made a visit to Almora, and from Almora to Kailash Mansarovar. And when he came back to Almora, he wrote a book called British Borderlands, Western Tibet and British Borderlands. And in this book, he made a particular case of promoting Kailash Mansarovar as a pilgrimage for ordinary Hindus. So while we believe as today as Hindus, as Jains, as Buddhists, as people of a number of faiths that Kailash and Mansarovar have been sacred sites from times immemorial, if we look at the actual history of that mountain in Tibet or that lake in Tibet, it was only for very particular sects of Hindus, particularly the Shiv Bhakts, शिव भगवान के भक्तों के लिए, that the Kailash mountain meant anything for last many centuries. Um, and it was only following the very enthusiastic promotion of the Kailash Mansarovar Yatra by Charles Shearing and his trying to create this whole notion of this being the only Kailash, this being the Kailash mountain, that the mountain that we today call Kailash in Tibet became a site for mass pilgrimage, what it has become over the last few decades. So, starting from that period, I want to share a few numbers. कि पुराने टाइम में in the earlier times how many people used to go to Kailash Mansarovar and how they have increased over time. So, according to British records by this person called Henry Strachey, in 1845 1846, from Almoda district, only two people, two fakirs, do fakir, uh, were able to succeed in going to Kailash Mansarovar. In 1907, 1907 में 150 people, Hindus from Almoda district through the Lipulekh route went to Kailash Mansarovar, and also through the other passes in that region like those of the Dharma Valley, etc. In 1930, about 600 Tibetans were reported and 730 Indians were reported to have done the Kailash Mansarovar pilgrimage. In 1931, along with the 700 odd Indians who had been, in according to recent numbers, been making that visit, um, there were now 700 more pilgrims in 1930 because of a retinue brought about by the Maharaja of Mysore to do the pilgrimage in that year. And before the Chinese completed their annexation of Tibet in 1950s, the last record of how many Indians completed the Kailash Mansarovar pilgrimage is about 600 people. So, if you want to look at the history of what the Kailash mountain pilgrimage is, what it stands for, where are the other Kailash mountains in India and in other parts of the Himalayas, and how this one particular mountain in Tibet came about to be regarded as the Kailash mountain, there is an excellent book that I would heartily recommend. Apart from Swami Pranavananda's Kailash Mansarovar, there is a book called Kailash Histories, written in 2015 by a historian from the University of London called Alex McKay. So you should definitely look up that book. And yeah, so through all this period in the colonial era and all the way till 1962, the Shoka community of which was residing in the Mahakali Valley also provided logistical support to the pilgrims. And in 1962, due to the war between India and China in October-November 1962, the Kailash Mansarovar pilgrimage was stopped for the next 20 odd years. I think in 1982, the pilgrimage was resumed, and Subramaniam Swami was among the first group that went on the pilgrimage from Indian side when the pilgrimage was resumed after a period of 20 years. And the border trade between the borderland community of the Shokas and the Tibetans was allowed to be resumed between by the governments of India and China after agreement in December 1951, 1991, signed by the Premier of China and Rajiv, not Rajiv Gandhi, whosoever the Prime Minister was in 1991 in Delhi. And yeah, so what till now, what the Kailash Mansarovar pilgrimage looked like. So, if you are an Indian and you want to go to Kailash Mansarovar from India to China, like that's where the uh, mountain and the lake is right now, then there are a few routes of going there. One is the through the Ministry of External Affairs, which annually does a lottery system. You make an application, you send it to the Ministry of External Affairs. If you fit the criteria health wise, age wise, then your entry into the lottery is considered valid and you are considered for the lottery, and if you are lucky you get selected, and then you get sent either by the Lipulekh Road route or a route that was opened in 2003 2005, the Nathula route. And the challenge of the Lipulekh route was that the Lipulekh route had to be walked in for 5 to 7 days. up till Lipulekh, and after that you would have to take on the Chinese side you could just take a car and go till the base of Kailash mountain, and there you would again need to do a 2-3 day parikrama, and then you would be brought down by a car back to Taklakot, and then from Taklakot again till Lipulekh another car would drop you, and then from Lipulekh you would have to walk all the way back to Narayana Ashram or Darchula. So, and the other route that was opened up via Nathula was completely motorized. So, and the people who facilitated this movement were the Kumaon Mandal Vikas Nigam, the tourism branch of Uttarakhand of the Kumaon division, and the ITBP, the Indo-Tibetan Border Police. And what has happened of late? What has happened of late is that in 2020, now that the road is complete, um, so it has been completed in a context that is very different even from last year because of the coronavirus crisis. So this year I am hearing that even traders have agreed perhaps to not conduct trade into China because of the coronavirus pandemic, and it yet remains uncertain if the Kailash Mansarovar Yatra will indeed go ahead for this year. Although I have seen some of the private operators perhaps might continue it, but I am not quite sure if the government of India will do its dues through the Lipulekh Road this year. And do I see the pilgrim numbers swelling now? Well, they could swell now. I mean, the government's capacity to take them to Kailash Mansarovar has definitely increased with the coming of the road, and the logistics will be much easier now. But there is a word of caution here that between Darchula and Lipulekh Pass, there is a very dramatic increase of height of altitude within a matter of about 80 kilometers, less than 80 kilometers. So within a few hours, you are climbing up from like 500-600 meters above sea level to about 5,100 meters above sea level. And I would say that when till now, what was happening that people were walking over a matter of 5-6 days, so they had ample time to get acclimatized. But with this very sudden and dramatic journey, which you can easily do within a day, your people's health would really be risked. For example, in 2016, when I did the Kailash Mansarovar Yatra from Humla, many of the people from India who were taking that route, they were the people who had been rejected by the government of India. They were not able to get a place in the government of India's tour that it takes to Kailash Mansarovar through Nathula or through Lipulekh. So they were the ones going through the Hilsa border in Nepal. So among these people, I saw that they were coming on one day from Kathmandu to Nepalganj by flight or by car. The same day they would fly to Simikot, the district headquarters of the border district of Humla, and then the same day after, that's like at 3000 meters altitude, Nepalganj is at 400 meters. So on the same day you are going from 400 meters to 3000, and then within a few hours you would take a helicopter which would take you to Hilsa, which is at nearly 4000 meters. And that day, till just in the first month that the Kailash Mansarovar Yatra had started, about 14 Indian pilgrims had died by doing this kind of journey because of high altitude related ailments like cerebral edema or cardiac arrest and so on. So I think acclimatization has to be really taken care of on this new way of journey so that if increased numbers of people go there, their health is not compromised. And besides the yatra itself, one has to remember that it is passing through a lived landscape, like people who are living there are the Shokas, as I was talking about earlier. The Shoka community lost much of its traditional livelihoods following the 1962 Indo-China War, which literally strangled the traditional transhumance and trans-border trade that they used to do with China. On a very small scale, it was resumed in 1991. It has never been able to resume the kind of significance it had in the pre-Indo-China War days, this trade. And but many new employment opportunities have opened up in this region for the Shoka community, which include government service. Then many people have been migrating to regions outside. And in the last 15-20 years, there has also been a lot of collection of medicinal and aromatic plants taking place in that region, particularly of Ophiocordyceps sinensis, which is basically Yarsagumba or Kida Jadi. So the Mahakali Valley has some of the richest collections of site for Kida Jadi Booty collection. And I think in the last few years it has become also very lucrative options for people of Mahakali Valley to earn a living from, whether it be on the Nepali side or whether they be on the Indian side. And much of it is happening without government regulation or management. And with the coming of the road, I think there will be certain new opportunities and challenges both to regulate it better, both to manage it better. One will be that right now the Shoka people, for example, consider the Yarsagumba collection sites, the Kida Jadi Booty collection sites within Mahakali to be exclusively theirs. So the people of Budhi village, for example, along the Kailash Mansarovar route, consider the Yarsagumba collection sites there to be exclusively theirs. Similarly, the people of Garbyang on the Indian side, they consider that they have traditional customary ties, not just of Beti Roti Ka Rishta, but also of collecting rangeland resources, including Yarsagumba, from the rangelands at the base of Mount Api Nampa in the Nepali side. So, and the people of Changdu and Tinker, like the Nepali villages at the base of Apinampa, recognize the rights, the customary rights of the people from Garbyang to collect Yasagumba. But the people of Changdu and Tinker are against any other people from India to come to these places to collect Yarsagumba, and they are similarly even opposed to non-Shoka people from the lower villages of Mahakali Valley to come and collect Yarsagumba in the upper Mahakali Valley. So, with the coming of the road, I guess there will be an increased pressure also. There might be an increased influx of people who might want to participate and take care of this, make gains from this Yarsagumba trade in the upper Mahakali Valley. So, with the coming of the road, I think what other impacts could be there, what other effects could be there for the people residing within the Mahakali Valley? I think one of the major effects will be definitely that healthcare and emergency support will become much easier for them. Till now, I've been aware through my work in Spiti that, well, that's a longer story, but that in the Mahakali Valley there has been a helicopter service delivering medical specialists for specialist camps in remote far-flung villages like Budi and Garbyang once in a month so that these people can be treated there and then, because otherwise if something adverse happens to people in these villages, then they often have to walk for days. They had to walk for days down, or they would have no other option. Yeah, so now I guess the helicopter services perhaps may not be needed so much anymore, also because there is this road going all the way up. So healthcare access will become easier, then I guess it will also give the government a chance to improve the telecom connectivity in the Mahakali Valley. When I went there in 2014-15, the only network that you could get above Narayana Ashram all the way till Garbyang was actually not even BSNL. It was Sky Nepal, the Nepali connection, yeah, which you had to get from Khalanga, the other side of Darchula town in India, the Nepali side. Yeah. So with this, I hope that the Indian government can also improve its own telecom networks in that area, thereby helping both pilgrims and local communities, as it has been recently doing in the valley where I am currently doing my PhD, which is the Spiti Valley. Till now, the only connection they had was BSNL, but last December, Geo networks, 4G networks had been installed in Spiti Valley. Then, apart from the Kailash Mansarovar pilgrimage itself, I think the Mahakali Valley is also having a tremendous tourism potential of its own. And I was struck by how little known the Mahakali Valley is among tourism circuits and among backpackers and among adventurers who have been a very rapidly growing sector of tourism. Sorry, in India over the last few years. Although with this pandemic right now going on, the coronavirus pandemic, the tourism industry as such might be facing some very big challenges and may not quite resume the kind of numbers and activities that we have been seeing in the last few years for maybe a year or two. But I still feel that with the coming of this road into the Mahakali Valley, we have a better chance of developing community based tourism and also homestay based tourism in the Mahakali Valley. One thing that I was quite struck by the visiting the villages in the middle and upper Mahakali Valley was how beautiful their traditional carved houses are of the old Shoka traders, the Indo-Tibetan traders and all. And a lot of these houses are lying vacant because of the people have migrated outside to other states, etc. for work. So I guess they can, one of the things that can help bring people back, that can create reverse migration in these hills is tourism alongside the agriculture and horticultural activities that the coming of the road could enable in the Mahakali Valley. I mean, the weather there, the water conditions there are very good for the development, for the scoping of vegetable farming or pulses or even horticulture of various kinds, and it can be fruitfully tried out. I mean, if a trans-Himalayan valley like Spiti can become such a major producer of the green tea or of the apple crop, then Mahakali can also very well, I think, aspire to do so with improved road connectivity now. And the last thing I would like to talk about is that there will definitely be some environmental fallouts of the Lipulekh Road, and among them, I consider that waste management could become a big problem with more number of people coming to the Mahakali Valley for Kailash Mansarovar pilgrimage or for trading and agricultural activities within the valley or for even defense purposes for whatever reason. And there could be much more construction happening in the Mahakali Valley. The mountains are brittle in any case, and that has been shown to us very amply by the 2013 flash floods in Uttarakhand. I went there in 2014 April to some villages in the lower Mahakali, including Sirdang, Sirkha, Sosa, Narayanashram, etc., to Dharchula, and I saw the amount of destruction that the flash floods had caused. One thing which would be good now is that disaster relief would be easier to provide to this valley. But negative outcome of the road could be that because of more pollution, the microclimate of the valley could be affected because of it. And things could become slightly more unpredictable than they already are right now. And there was anecdotal evidence at that time of poaching and hunting happening in the upper Mahakali Valley. I guess that now the government will have better chances of monitoring the situation on the ground with the coming of this road. But they would have to be on their toes because it's often been seen that when roads reach ecological interfaces, the opportunities to make undue benefit out of that through activities like illegal extraction of resources or poaching, etc., also increase. So I guess the local communities and the governments will have to work together on that. Yeah. So, any questions? I would be happy to answer them now. You mentioned something curious about Henry Strachey, curious to know more about his survey. So, Henry Strachey was a person who visited Kailash Mansarovar in the 1840s, and I think he has a published survey. I can get back to you on that later on. And there is a whole published report actually that he has. I shall get back to you on the title and where you can perhaps download it from. Will the road effect impact the relations between the Indian and the Nepali Rang? Well, the Indian and the Nepali Rang are already very, as I was saying, they are already very closely tied to each other. They barely regard the border, like for their everyday existence, the border means next to nothing. Um, the Indian Rang, when I went there, they were often going to Khalanga to buy mobile SIMs. The Nepali Rang, the ones who had particularly wanted to travel to places like from Khalanga, like so basically the Indian part of the town is called Dharchula. It is connected by a bridge across the Mahakali to another town called Khalanga, which is the headquarters, the district headquarters of the Nepali district of Dharchula. So people would be crossing that bridge and going from the Indian side up along the trail along Mahakali to get to the Nepali villages of Changru and Tinker. Because the trail on the Nepali side was very dangerous. It was very dangerous to be walked on. So that kind of tie was already there, and there is also a lot of marriage that happens there already. So I guess if anything, then whatever has already been happening, the kind of ties that the Rang on the Indian and Nepali side have had, they could only see increase of activity in that. Yeah. So any more questions? Is it true that the Nepali stand is more of a reaction to their internal situation than historic claims? Uh, that's a challenging question, Lokesh ji. Mm, Definitely, the internal political situation of Nepal is precarious. It's been challenging. The establishment of democracy in Nepal has been a very uphill task, and they've received a lot of flack over the way they have dealt with also the coronavirus crisis in the country, the coming back of the migrant people from the borders with India, and so on. And although they have had increasing ties with China also, but this claim that they have had over the Lipulekh and Kalapani, it's a very old claim and it comes up from time to time. And it's like, I mean, what I can think of it, it is in terms of what often happens also in other countries, that if they are unable to manage their internal problems well, then they beat up the drum of an external threat as being a greater threat to the sovereignty of the country and all. But Nepal, if you look strictly from the point of view of the Treaty of Sigoli, they do have some legitimate concerns. But the thing that doesn't work in favor of the government of Nepal about its claims for over Lipulekh and Kalapani is the very long periods of relative silence that the country exercised when a lot of developments were happening between India and China along the Lipu Lake. For example, I'll give you two or three examples. In 1954, there was a trade agreement, the Sino-Indian Trade Agreement of 1954. It mentioned that one of the six passes where the trade between India and China would be allowed to continue, and Tibet would be allowed to continue in 1954 after the Chinese annexation of Tibet, was the Lipulekh Pass, one of the six passes back then. Then the war happened, and when the trade was resumed in 1991, the only pass where the governments of China and India agreed bilaterally to conduct trans-border trade and resume ties of pilgrimage was Lipulekh Pass. At that point of time, there was very little like concern being coming out of Kathmandu regarding that this was just a bilateral agreement, and why was not Lipulekh Road considered a tri-juncture or a part of Nepal. So it's a complicated issue, and I guess it has to be best dealt with by the diplomatic institutions of India and Nepal, and least of all by the press of India in particular, because they have had a very corrosive effect in the past also on our ties with Nepal. I saw that personally during the earthquake days in Kathmandu and in 2015, and later on during the blockade during the Madhesi agitation in late 2015, early 2016, how much anger there was in Nepal against the Indian media. So the Indian media, I think, also needs to be more sensitive and sensible in how they deal with issues regarding Nepal. Any more questions? So Lokesh ji, are we done then? Or okay, curious about the cartographic impact. Whose map? Okay, this I've done. The road development has been more pro or con. For instance, locals of the Chatham thrust their long road journeys to Dehradun in conflicting China. Where do we place China in this? Okay. Then there is this question. In your experience of the Indian Himalayas, is there any place where development has been more pro or a con for the locals, for example? Okay. See, sir, I have presently been doing my PhD in the Spiti Valley in Himachal Pradesh, and I would say that if you look at what kind of effects can a road have in a remote Himalayan region, in a remote border region, I think for a welfare state to increase its reach and to increase the kinds of services that it can provide to borderland people. In that sense, it has definitely had many positive attributes as well. The reach of healthcare has increased, even though it is still far from perfect. The reach of schools and till senior secondary education has increased in the Spiti Valley. Then tourism has been made possible on a larger and larger scale due to the presence of the roads there, particularly in the last 4 or 5 years when Spiti began to be get more noticed on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, etc. after the making of certain movies, etc. So I guess that roads can have a lot of positive impacts as well. The question, though, that every place in the Himalayas which has gotten connected by roads sooner or later faces is that how much is safe, how much of connectivity with the world outside the valley or the world outside this remote region is sustainable in the long run, whether it be about the numbers of tourism, whether it be about um out migration, whether it be about like the ways in which people would like to sustain livelihoods and lifestyles in the region. And for that, the responses have varied from places to place. Yeah. But I do believe that ultimately there can be a lot more, there can be many positives to the coming in of roads also. But there still arguably can be regions where uh, which can be circumscribed, which can be kept away for conservation purposes, whether it be for cultural conservation, whether it be for particularly for natural conservation, wherein road connectivity does not help. And as for the Kailash Mansarovar Yatra, one thing that time and again you read in the Mahatmya, जो पुराने टाइम में जो आपके वो होते थे पिलग्रिमेज को सपोर्ट करने के लिए जो डॉक्यूमेंट्स प्रिपेयर किए जाते थे किसी भी मंदिर के बारे में, किसी भी तीर्थ स्थान के बारे में, उनमें आप ये पढ़ा करते थे कि ये तीर्थ स्थान बहुत ही दुर्लभ रहा है और यहाँ आने में जो कष्ट लोगों ने सहे हैं उससे एक आपके अंतःकरण की शुद्धि होती है. You get purified from within as you make that journey, that difficult journey. So now with that journey becoming so easy, as my supervisor, Professor William Sachs, was also saying last week, ये जो एक शुद्धिकरण का जो प्रोसेस है दैट्स गॉन आउट ऑफ द विंडो विच कम्स विद द मेकिंग द डिफिकल्ट जर्नी ऑल्सो. सो आई गेस somehow it would be interesting to see if some people would continue to use the Lipulekh route on foot because of to get that authentic spiritual experience, or if everyone would then just go for the time saving road experience. Yeah. Where do we place China in Bhutan's approach on controlled tourism? It is painted that the revenue is Bhutan's approach on controlled tourism. Bhutan's approach to controlled tourism का तो ये है सर कि मैम Bhutan's approach. Bhutan has really limited numbers of tourists that it allows in every year, particularly from Western countries, industrialized countries, Far East Asian countries. There's a very high daily charge that they charge them, 220 or $250 a day, I think it is. And within that, the costs of your guide, hotel stay, food, etc., are all included. But if you are doing any shopping, that you have to then spend addition of $20. That kind of model could be like then that poses some difficult questions for democracy. Like, are you then trying to promote tourism only for the elite? Do people with budget or with lower income groups, are they not entitled? Do they not have the right to go for uh, tourist activity to the Himalayas? Yeah. So I guess that the Bhutan model might work to a certain degree for Bhutan, but it definitely is not a perfect model either. And particularly for a country like India, where the kind of people, like the vast diversity of peoples and the vast aspirations of people of seeing Himalayas, not just as a tourist site but also as a pilgrimage site. Uh, so people from every strata of the society want to visit the Himalayas also as a place of respite from the heat, as cheap sites like money-wise cheap sites where they can easily go and escape the heat and get close to nature, etc. So I guess it will also, one way out could be some kind of a lottery system also, that beyond maybe 100,000 tourists in a particular place or maybe a few thousand tourists in a particular place, more will not be entertained because the resources available in a particular site cannot sustain more numbers of people, more numbers of tourists in this site. And for that, you require very detailed studies of the natural resources of any particular tourist site. This much is the annual water supply of this place. This much is how much waste can be recycled or managed. This much is the room capacity, and thereby we provide you that say 20 to 25,000 tourists can be annually accommodated within this place, and what are the degrees to which the tourism resources of a particular site can be stretched. Can you suggest a good startup course on anthropology? I think a good startup course on anthropology in India, I myself passed out of Delhi School of Economics in Delhi University, which was really good. That was in 2012. So that's one good place. JNU used to have a very good department. And I know that in India, other than that, the Ashoka University has a very good department on sociology or anthropology. These three places I would feel are pretty solid in India, within India, on sociology, anthropology. Elaborate how we could conceptually distinguish between pilgrimage and tourism. This is again a hard one. I think the distinction often gets blurred because often pilgrims also these days engage in activities that could be considered touristy, uh, in the sense that they go to a place, they pay for their accommodation, they pay for travel from one place to the another, they pay for food, they pay for guiding services, they pay for the rituals, etc. So certain amount of income comes through them as well, and this is true for most pilgrims. Yeah. Uh, but the few pilgrims who would be perhaps out of this category would be the sadhus or the sannyasis who literally are dependent only upon alms given by people or who live in caves or in dogries, etc. You come across some of them when you walk in the higher Himalayas, etc. But those are very few people. Today, most people who go to pilgrimage sites to do pilgrimage are uh, like if looked at from a economic perspective, they are also fulfilling the purpose of tourism. So they could be called religious tourists, yeah, or non-religious tourists. And for tourists also, sometimes tourists are not just like, they don't have to be atheists to feel interested in a place like Kailash Mansarovar. I mean, tourists also report that they feel deeply moved by the beauty of the place, the beauty of the mountains. They also feel very interested in the society, the culture, the history, the mythology of the site. They also feel very deeply interested in the religious aspects of such place. And I meet a lot of them in Spiti. Like Spiti, where I currently do my work, is becoming globally known as a site where Tibetan Buddhism is alive in some of the forms that it is no longer been able to do even in on the Tibetan plateau itself within China, because of all the kinds of changes that have happened within China over the last 50, 60 years. That kind of the more purer and older forms of Tibetan Buddhism you can find being practiced in places like Spiti or in Humla district in Nepal, etc., etc. So a lot of tourists that come there come to get a feeling of that tourism, of that religion, and it sometimes sparks of some religious aspirations also in them, or they engage in behaviors which would conventionally be understood as religious. So I guess it's hard to draw the distinction. You could, yeah, conceptually. So I guess that's it, and I would like to conclude the talk here. I hope this was of some information and some help for you. And thank you very much for being so patient and for being there for today. Bye.